I welcome Professor Manisha. Professor Manisha is an assistant professor at IIT Gandhinagar. She completed her BTech in electrical engineering from IIT Jodhpur and earned her PhD from IIIT Hyderabad in 2023. Her research includes fairness in machine learning, game theory, and mechanism design. Prior to joining IIT Gandhinagar, she was a postdoctoral fellow at ISC Bangalore. So please bring a big round of applause to welcome Professor Manisha.
Thank you very much. Great to be here and welcome all of you to IIT Gandhinagar. I hope you've had a productive summer this time. So today I'll be actually talking about one of our group's recent work. So today I'll be talking about one of our group's recent work. So this is related to federated learning. So how many of you know or at least have heard of this term, federated learning? Okay, very few. So how many of you are familiar with deep learning? Okay. Machine learning, deep learning? Okay, so that's good. So like you've already heard probably, my main focus area is fairness and privacy of ML models, right? So what makes federated learning interesting is the fairness and privacy aspects in FL are even more challenging, right? So today we will, so this is the agenda of today. We will just take a brief look at what really is federated learning, right? And today we'll be focusing on one aspect of it, which is the adversarial attacks that are possible in federated learning, right? So how many of you know what are adversarial attacks? You know what's an adversary? From the generative adversarial network, okay. Lot of polymorphism. So that's a different adversary, but yeah, technically it's an adversary. So we'll just talk about what is an adversarial attack. We will see what is robust aggregation. Then we will come to the research topic of my interest, which is fairness. And we will really see how do you ensure fairness in an FL setting? What really is fairness? Why do we need fairness? Do we really need to worry about it? And then also, what sort of attacks are possible when it comes to fairness, right? So that's the agenda for today. Okay, so let's begin. How many of you recognize this? What is this? Any ideas? Data center, right? So it's a very, very huge data center. So typically the data centers consume a lot of power, like 50 megawatts to 200 megawatts. So 1 megawatt is enough to power 100 homes, right? So imagine the amount of power that this particular data center is consuming. Apart from that, there is the logistic issues of having to maintain such a center. This is just the hardware part of it. Then you have the governance part of it, right? So all of our data is sitting there, right? And the company is making a lot of money out of it. Other than that, you really want to share let's say you really want to share the data because they are offering nice, whatever, applications, etc. But still, it's not very easy to share data across organizations or across countries. So let's say there are different hospitals, right? And each hospital has a very expensive machine, right? Some MRI machine. MRI is probably not, it's fairly common. Some more uncommon machine, right? Only one particular few hospitals have. So they have the data corresponding to that machine, right? And they are able to do some sort of analysis based on that. But what would be more productive if many such hospitals collaborate and try to train a model based on the data and the output and try to get better, let's say, better results or better diagnosis, etc., right? But private hospitals, it's not very easy to share your data. So having data sit in some data center is next to impossible when the data is owned by a particular private entity, right? So all of this just points to us that centralized training that we are so familiar with, right? You just share your data, all the data sits together and you train your model on this data together. That is very, very tough, right? That needs to cross a lot of logistics and governance barriers. So what is the next best thing? So Google, as usual, came up with this approach, which is known as federated learning. And they have first implemented that on this Gboard. So Gboard is the Google keyboard, right? So in the keyboard, you have a lot of chats that you, and probably many of them are very private, you wouldn't want to share, right? So it's it would be very unethical of Google to sort of collect all your chats. So the idea that you want to, so the model that you want to deploy here is to next word prediction, right? So it's easy for you to chat. So in order to be able to very good at predicting what would likely be your next word, Google deployed some model, right? So now, since it cannot collect the data, right, from you, then how would it train a model, right? It cannot train a model only on your data, because maybe the kind of chat is not very extensive or very useful to extract all possible patterns. Only when it has access to chats of a reasonably large amount of chat history, it can do a good prediction. So now how do we solve this problem? It cannot collect your data, but it needs more data for a better model, right? So what they do instead, so McMahon et al. 2017 is the first paper which proposes federated learning, right? And they do experiments on this Gboard data, right? Simulated Gboard data. Okay. So Google's federated learning, what it proposes is, then they had these tiny language models. I don't know if you have heard of recurrent neural networks, RNNs, right? So those were the models of that time. So they had used these tiny RNNs, and they deployed all these RNNs in each of our phones, okay? Each of the end user's phone. Now, each model that is deployed in our phone is trained only on our data. It's only trained on the local data. Now we need a model that is trained on all our data. So how will that happen? So instead of sharing our data, what we will share is the model updates that we make in our models, right? So there is one common architectural RNN that is shared across all users. They all train or determine gradients, right? I'm assume everybody is familiar with what is this term, which is gradients, right? You do gradient descent to learn your neural network, etc., right? So you do some sort of one-step learning, let's assume, in your local data, and you model with the global, the central aggregator, the one who is sitting, right? So this is the general idea. So in federated learning, it's a very simple idea. What you need to do is, instead of sharing the data, you share your trained model. But the question is, at the end, you can only test on one model. You need one final trained model. So how do you aggregate all these models is the question, right? To get one global model. So this is the FL setup. You have a central client, central server, right? Typically the cloud server. And what it does is, you have all these local clients which have some smaller models trained. So it starts with the central server deploying a small model, same model, for simplicity, let's assume, with the same architecture, same number of hidden layers, neurons, etc. on all these phones that you have. So all these clients will now train a local model, train the model on their local data set, and then they share the model with the global client. Now the question is, I have so many models, how do I aggregate? So the simple idea that you use to aggregate is weighted average. Okay. So what is the weighted average? So each of these clients do a gradient descent step, right? WT. So each of them have received the same model, which is WT1. And then in WT plus 1, they are updating the WT, and in the next step, they are doing one step update, each of the clients. And you've got WT plus 1, 1, 2, 3 of them aggregate. So what you do is you do a weighted aggregation. So if N1 is the number of samples that client 1 has, then the weight corresponding to the coefficient corresponding to the weights of the client 1 is n1 by n, right? So if I as a client practically I do not have any data, right? I have a very less amount of data compared to the other clients. So my weights are not that important, right? In the global average. If a client has a large amount of data, then we would sort of have put more weightage to that particular client's weights, okay? Okay. So this sort of thing also works only because all the models have same architecture, right? So any confusion here? How federated? Yes. So are you saying if there is a test sample in future, then I will send the test sample to each of the clients and average out their predictions instead of the weights? Yes. It has to be used by Google, let's say. Yeah.
And I get recommendations based on what I type. Suppose I type in Hindi and I use some lingos which are not used by someone else.
Right.
And someone else might be using some other lingos, suppose in Marathi or any other language. Is it a good idea to average this out?
Okay. So the premise is we are trying to learn so in general, people speak similarly, right? So if I say cat is walking, let's say, you would also likely say cat is walking. It's very unlikely that you will say cat is flying, right? Because cat won't fly. And it's very unlikely that some of us will speak that way. So learning holistically helps the model learn these regular grammars. On top of that, of course, it works better if it is specifically fine-tuned for you because you have your own style of conversation as opposed to the others. But the general conversations that we have will definitely have a pattern to which that we want to learn that requires more data. So for example, ChatGPT, since it's trained on the entire internet's data, it's able to do a lot of things which are even specific for me, right? Otherwise, a model which is only trained on my own data won't probably see half of the grammar because I use very limited grammar or sentences. So that's the idea.
The data. I'm not doing the data part I get for that we have general models like these LLMs, they are trained entire over corpus, right? So they must have that nuances like the grammar and all. Then I'm still not able to connect this. Why it's a good idea to do this?
So would you be convinced because here it's just language, so you would assume that you could train it on a largely available public corpus. But think of it in the context of hospitals or data clinics where not a lot of patients will be there for very rare diseases, right? But patients will be there across hospitals for sure. So training, let's say I have a particular image or particular report of the patient and I want to predict whether I want to do some sort of diagnosis on that. But I only have a history of 10 patients. But in the whole country, we would have 20,000 or even million patients, let's say. So that would be a larger data set for us to train, right? So if I have a model only for 10 patients of mine, that barely will have any good performance.
No, still the question is data is fine because we can always aggregate it across.
That's the point, right? We cannot, because I cannot share my personal patient's data.
In the medical domain, when you will be training, you'll have the data from across the globe. Or is it not the case?
It's not the case. People won't be willing to share their personal patient data, right? That's the point.
We're still training something and sharing it across in this.
We are sending the models. We are not sending the data directly.
So the idea is to send, what is the whole picture, the federated learning? You train a model and then you send it across.
Send the model, yeah.
Okay, so that's
one way of federated learning, but yeah, that's...
Okay.
So instead of sharing, so the premise is you don't want to share the data. So now think of applications where you want to share the data and then you apply this, right? You train the model on your data and send the model instead of the data. Okay. Any other confusion, questions? Yes, weights and biases. The entire model, the architecture, weights, biases, everything. Sure, we can share the weights and you just aggregate the weights. The model essentially means the weights only, right? When I say a model, what is it? It's WB, 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 bunch of WBs, right? The weights, the weight matrices, the dimensions themselves will take care of the dimensions of your hidden layers, etc. Right? You could just think of it as a PTH file, I don't know, a pickle file of weights and biases. That's it. Yes.
Will my query be sent to the main cloud thing to predict the next token results or whatever?
No, so the model, the cloud is going to send in the final trained model. So I'll just show what happens is you keep repeating this process, right? You keep repeating this process till what point will you repeat the process? Till the point that your weights do not change a lot, right? So your model, you sent WT and you receive WT plus 1. If WT and WT plus 1 are reasonably close, that means your model has converged. No more change is happening in the weights. So that is your final model. Now this final model now is deployed on all your phones. Training is frozen and testing will happen on your phones.
Okay. So this WT plus 1 is shared back to the local.
Yeah, it's shared back.
Right.
Assume capital T, right? Final model. Good questions. Okay. So this is federated learning. So for example, these people did some experimental analysis on emoji prediction. And what they found was they were 7% more accurate than before when using federated learning. You have these prediction strip clicks, right? So when you are trying to write something and you're recommended some strip of text and you just click it because that is what you wanted to write, right? So they were able to increase the accuracy of the click rate by 4%, right? So they want you to click more. So that would indicate that they are accurately predicting. So now because of their accurate predictions, people have started using emojis also more often because they don't really have to search for the emojis. They'll have to just click on the recommendations, right? So this helps you engage more with their platform in some sense. So these are some of the ways they are trying to sell their model federated learning, and this is the paper that talks about this. Similarly, you have other applications which is action prediction, wherein you're sending some sticker, GIF, etc. So here they say that using FL, they were able to reduce the unhelpful sessions by 47%. I don't know how you'll have to read through the paper to really figure out how they evaluated this exact term, but this in general is how FL really helps, at least in academic analysis, right? In the research paper analysis. Other than that, it's not restricted to Google. Apple they also have used in federated learning in Siri. Other than that, medical institutions have collaborated. So this is NVIDIA, Clara with, I'm not sure which university, Ohio State, Stanford, and I think these are the two universities that have collaborated for improving a certain mammogram assessment. This is, I think, for breast cancer. Similarly, there is one more FL, which is used across UPenn, and Intel is the one which is providing the software or the framework where they can actually deploy the FL setup. In the above case, it's NVIDIA. In the below case, it's Intel. So if you actually want to do some projects on federated learning, you would get Intel and NVIDIA related libraries, right? Wherein you can deploy your model. Other than that, there is TensorFlow federated learning framework. There is also Flower Federated Learning Framework. They are all going to help you seamlessly write the FL code in a very very high level programming, right? So other than this, NVIDIA has also deployed it in self-driving cars, right? So so all these self-driving cars, they have to be able to navigate through the traffic seamlessly. They need some sort of predictive analysis in terms of signs or pedestrians, etc. A lot of object detection. So now they share their data. Instead of sharing my data of whatever is happening through my camera, I'll just have a federated learning system run here, right? So that will help me learn from somebody else's driving experience as well, right? So that's the philosophical idea of it. Okay. So this is the success of federated learning. Seems very nice, right? But, and it seems to work also quite well. But now what I want you to think of some issues with the current federated learning setup. So what I am simply doing is I'm simply taking the average of all your models, considering that to be my global model and deploying it. That's what I'm doing. So what do you think would be issues with this? Right? What do you think can go wrong with such a system? Sure, you have read the title. So adversary is one thing, but something more simpler. Let's forget about adversary. Do you think even though there is no adversary, this system will work fine? Security issues is same as adversary, let's say. So let's say there is no security, completely secure system, I promise. One at a time, yes. Hey, wonderful. That's like one of the major issues with federated learning. So all the devices that are involved in your training may not be active at the same time, right? And there might be delay in terms of communicating with each of these devices. So that, though might seem trivial, becomes a logistic overhead when it comes to crores of users, right? Crores of models. So what you typically do is of course, only consider models which are active. So you don't aggregate the entire population's models, you aggregate a subset of models and eventually you hope that it will converge. Other than that, still does not resolve the issue of time lags, right? If a particular system might be active, but the time it takes to transfer the model might be different, right? The times might be different. So all of these are very much a big issue. That's something that you need to tackle. Okay, that's good. Other than that, any other issues that you can see? That's correct. Averaging ensures that you're converging only under certain assumptions. What is that assumption? So very simply, let's look at this case. If I have, let's say I'm doing a prediction of cats versus dogs, right? And there are two clients, me and somebody else, my friend. I have all the dog images and my friend has all the cat images. So do you think the local model will be good? Right? Do you think averaging such a model which is only trained on dogs images and the different model which is only trained on cats images will help? Won't, right? This is one extreme issue where the client's data is heterogeneous. I have a completely different, also, if the distribution from which my data is sampled from is very different from the distribution from which your data is sampled from, then convergence is not guaranteed, right? Generally, anyway, in neural network, only convergence is not guaranteed to a very good extent, right? It's only guaranteed under so many assumptions. But even under those assumptions, convergence is guaranteed here only if all our data sets have come from the same distribution, right? So that's one more issue. So communication, logistic overhead, heterogeneous data. So FL in general anyway has a lot of issues, right? So people have come up with various aggregation techniques, different kinds of aggregation techniques to overcome these issues and in some case also give convergence guarantees, right? So but for today's talk, we are not going to delve into the details of all those issues. We will only be focusing on one issue, which is attacking a model, right? Malicious clients, how do you attack in the case when there is in security aspects in general, right? So let's just see what an adversarial attack really is. So this is a image from ImageNet data, right? And if I take this image and give it to a model, I'm not sure which model's prediction this is, but it correctly predicts that this belongs to a certain breed of dog, which is the Spaniel, English Springer Spaniel. So with probability 90%, it's fairly confident that it belongs to this particular breed. Now I show it a different image, right? So are you guys able to see any difference between these two images? Spot the differences. Exactly. So the idea is the image is visually, it's not different to us, right? But given this input image to the model, now it completely predicts a very different class. It's a very different breed of dog, looks fairly different. I'm not very familiar with the breeds, and it's fairly reasonably confident about that particular breed, right? Chihuahua. So this is adversarial attack. So what is the adversary trying to do? Adversary is trying to ensure that your model's performance is hurt, right? So the X remains almost the same, right? So similar that your eyes, you are not able to make a difference, but your Y from the model is completely changing, right? So because so since this is centralized data, assume that I am the server, I am looking at all the data. If I can inspect, right? If there is an image which is much perturbed really badly, right? Then I can easily make out, oh, this has been compromised. This particular image has been compromised and I can remove it. Which is why the adversary must add perturbations that are not visually, that are not very obvious, right? Must add perturbations that are not very obvious so that I will anyway include that in my training data and then confuse the model a lot. So the idea is the adversary is powerful but not very powerful. The adversary cannot really manipulate the training data as he pleases, can only manipulate to an extent that the one who is training cannot really make the difference between the images, right? So in such a case, with minimum perturbation, how bad can you make the model perform? That is the goal of the adversary. So this is known as the data poisoning attack. What is the data poisoning attack? You want to slightly perturb the data to increase the model's error, right? And this is a particular nice website which gives you, so this image also I took from there. So let's say I have MNIST data and this is the original image. I run a neural network. It is predicting 0 with 100% probability. Now I want to cause a attack. So there are different attacks that are possible, right? Carlini and Wagner is one such attack. So I want this particular attack. I want the model to be fooled into predicting this 0 as 6, let's say, okay? And I want to perturb the model, image. So the image is perturbed. See, it slightly looks like 6 now though, because the 0 itself was looking like 6 to some. So now the model is actually fooled into predicting it as 6 with 68%, 69% probability. So you could do, it won't work always, but sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. So let's take a slightly harder. So this is the image that so if I were to predict using this, maybe you guys can do it offline. I'll share the slides and the link with you. So you can also explore the different possible attacks that are here, right? Yeah. So this is predicted as Tench Tinker. I am not sure what this is, but we could try to convert this as some assault rifle, let's say. Okay, while this runs, I can probably continue with the So what is the objective that an attacker is trying to solve? So I am given a clean input, x0 and y0 is the clean input with its correct label. So I want to ensure that the model is predicting this x0 as something different than y0, some y prime, right? So what do I do? So first of all, I want the perturbation to be small, right? So I want to minimize the distance between x and x0, right? I want to perturb x0. I want to perturb x0 to x, but I don't want to make a lot of changes. So I want to minimize the distance between x and x0. And further, I want to minimize the classification error of x with an incorrect label y prime, right? So this is my goal. This is, as an attacker, this is the optimization that I will solve, right? So this is what Carlini and Wagner do. They minimize the L2 norm. This is the L2 norm between x and x naught, plus the cross entropy loss between x and y prime. Y prime is a incorrect label, right? This is what you want to minimize. They have a fancier way of minimizing, but this is like the overall general idea I'm giving, right? So this is the paper which does it. And by doing that, they are able to successfully manipulate. It's a targeted attack. You want to change it to a specific incorrect label of your choice. Let's see if that, I don't know, this definitely did not work, right? Changed the image to a very large extent. Okay, so just wanted to show that you could explore that particular app a bit more. So this is the data poisoning attack that I wanted to talk about. But this is in a centralized setup. So imagine in a decentralized setup, the adversary can become even more strong. Why? Because the adversary now need not perturb the data slightly, because the entire client itself can be malicious. If the entire client is malicious, then the client is responsible for the training, everything in the client level, right? So the client can just manipulate the data in whatever way the client wants and send the malicious model. Doesn't have to have any stealthy perturbation. So that's the idea. So in an adversarial setup, the subset of clients are malicious, right? And then the goal is to manipulate the global model such that the errors are high, right? And how do I manipulate the global model? I manipulate the global model by corrupting the local model that I have. My local model goes to the global model, right? So the only control that I have is on the local model itself. So on the local model, I could perform different kinds of attacks. One is the data poisoning attack. By poisoning my local, I can generate a very adversarial data, which is very counter from the, let's say, the global data. For example, you could think of it as writing highly incorrect sentences, which do not follow any grammar at all, right? Those kind of sentences I could keep writing so that the model is, really it diverges from the actual grammatically correct sentences. Other than that, I could directly send a model which is poisonous, right? I don't really need to go through the data, right? Because it's the model that is going to the global server. So I could directly send some garbage model. I could just have some weights which are random weights and I send those. I could also do that. These are the different kinds of adversarial attacks which are much more severe in case of a FL setup. So here what you have is you have a global model which is sent to all these clients, but some of the majority, you'll assume that majority of the clients are good, right? And their updates are fine, but there are some minority which are adversarial, right? If the majority becomes adversarial, then that would become the normal, right? So you would assume that what is normal in our world is what is done by majority in some sense. So that's what we are assuming here, right? So the majority is the one which you consider is fine. The minority which do not follow the norm are the ones which are adversarial. So any doubts here or any questions, comments? Yes. In text. Okay. I am not very sure of what are the methods in text for images.
Basic iterative attack. So there must be some method for text also.
Agreed. But I have not read even a single work on that. But I would assume you would build some sort of data set which is very arbitrary. But in general, in federated learning, attacks could be independent of data. You could just share a model which is bad, irrespective of the data. You don't even need to go to the data route. But yeah, I have no idea.
For LLMs, I know that there are some jailbreak methods.
There are some jailbreak methods.
Jailbreak methods that is.
So what do they do?
Like, so there are some question which LLMs do not answer. Like, suppose if we ask how to make a bomb,
Okay.
then it would not output. But if we apply those jailbreak methods with that prompt, then it will tell how to make a bomb. Like one jailbreak method is that was that how to make a bomb, and then you put some gibberish after that, gibberish symbol.
Okay.
Then it was able to output.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
Okay. No, so this is in terms of toxic generation or some generation of something which is not standard. But here I am talking about degrading the quality of the model. So yeah, that I don't know.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask that since this model, the global model, is trained by weighted averaging. So the poisoned updates won't be as much. Like let's say by a simple guess, in 100 we have 1 or 2 that are poisoned and it's weighted. So I don't think in the global model when we're aggregating, there would be that much weights assigned to those kind of updates. So would it be like a small minor fluctuation only, or would it cause like a huge problem there?
Right. So that takes us to the next slide. So there are certain approaches in which, in fact, so this is the scaled attack is the one that you're supposed to be looking at. So here, so first of all, you can misreport the number of samples that you have with you, right? I could say I have reasonably large number of samples, although I don't have, so that the weightage given to an adversary is more. So as a center gator, I cannot assume that the adversaries are the ones with less number of samples. It may be the adversary is the one with a very reasonably large number of samples, right? Other than that, the kind of updates that I do, right? So it could be possible. So it's just a thought experiment. It could be possible that I have very clean data, but I'm an adversary. So what I do is I train my model on my clean data. So I know what is a good model, right? And now I purposefully train the model to be bad on this data, very, very bad on this data. So that would be exactly counter of whatever you're expecting, right? So that such an attack would reasonably have a lot of effect on your global model, as opposed to having a random attack. If you have a very smart way of attacking the model, then assuming that you have clean data, etc., then it would be a reasonably. And one more interesting thing about federated learning is every round you're going to get a global model, right? You're going to get a WT. And WT contains the information of what is a clean average. So you could always train the model to be somewhat of an opposite to that clean average, right? So you could be you could have a directed attack which is completely working against. So although so of course, if you are only 1% of clients are malicious, then the effect would be less as opposed to 20% of the clients being malicious. But you can reasonably sabotage the model. We'll see some experiments, right?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Oh, yes.
I had one more query. So the weights we were assigning in the generalization of, the aggregation, n1 upon n kind of thing. So that depends on the data quality too?
No. That directly is a faith. You have faith on the client. If a client says, I have 10,000 amount of data, you just assume that the client has 10,000 amount of data.
So the amount of adversary a client can cause in the main model, so it depends on the quantity.
As well. So you could just assume that they are very highly So you could just assume the worst case. If it is a worst case adversary with a very large amount of data, then how much of a disruption can that adversary cause, etc. Yeah. Okay. So there are different kinds of model poisoning attack where you send just random model updates. Before that, there are data poisoning attacks as well. You could do your gradient-based poisoning, which is somewhat similar to the Carlini and Wagner kind of attack, right? So you sort of create poisoned examples, but this is a very long route given that your adversary is much more powerful. So people have come up with other more obvious attacks like flipping the label, right? You have the clean input image, but you purposefully train it with wrong labels, right? As a local client, you could do that. And that would now generate a model which is very bad. So these are some attacks which are going through the data route. The other attacks are directly in the process of training, right? Either you could send some random model parameters, or you could train the parameters such that they are against the actual training process that you are trying to achieve or your objective that you're trying to achieve. I'm not very familiar with all these attacks, but I just know as a umbrella term what these different attacks are, right? And there are certain backdoor attacks. So what is a backdoor attack is that you do not want, so you're happy if the model is able to correctly predict dogs, but you are very unhappy if the model is correctly able to predict cats for some reason, personal vendetta or bias. So backdoor attack is that the attacker is unhappy with certain specific input images, right? So now what the attacker would do is the attacker won't in general inject some noise or in general cause disruption, but the attacker would only cause disruption for those particular test images. So if whenever there is an image of a cat, let's say, I introduce, so this is the cat image, I introduce a small patch of random pixels. And that patch is now causing the model to not perform so well on only cat images. So as a general, if I am an auditor who is trying to audit whether there is an adversary or not, it will be very hard for me to audit because it's only malicious for certain input images. So in your test set or your audit set, if this instance is not there or there in a very small quantity, you won't be even able to flag such a attack, right? So these are some backdoor attacks. So how do you defend against these attacks? So if I say there is 2%, less than 50% of the clients are malicious, what are the different ways would you, let's say, think would be reasonable enough to defend these? Any ideas? Fine. So here what you're saying is the central server has a small validation set of sorts, and the central server is going to validate on this particular set all the models, all the client models, and whichever client models perform reasonably well on this, you will pass. The rest you will fail. So this is a good idea. I think probably also used. One of our papers only does this, but it is one. How do you set the threshold? When is a model good? It may happen that the client's model is not very great. It's just that it's not very adversarial. But what is good and what is bad? How would you set that parameter? One thing. The other thing is that you are assuming that you have reasonably good amount of samples to evaluate the model, which might as well be good enough for you to train to some extent, right? So can we think of an approach where you don't need any data set? This is also valid. People do use, no doubt. Any other approach which probably does not require a validation set? So don't think in LLM context, think in general. If I have I don't know what independent of data, I have some models. Now I want to identify which is a malicious model. How would I do that? So we could imagine the weights to be some vectors, right, in a space, and then you could do something on top of that. Agreed. That is, I think that's the approach that I'll be covering. Any other suggestions, ideas? Okay. So the key is that you have maximum clients which are not malicious, right? So let's say, so this is one of the aggregator. The normal aggregator is Fed average, which is, I did not mention the name. So the weighted average that we talked about before is also known as Fed average or federated averaging. So this is one of the robust aggregators, which is CRUM, right? It's not an acronym, it's derived from some different countries' language, etc. So CRUM is a robust aggregator, and it works as follows. So the idea is that you have some F malicious clients, right? And you want to select. You do not want to aggregate all the models because F of them you know are malicious. But which of them will you select is the question, right? Which of the subset of models will you select? So what you do is for every model that you have, you give a score, right? If the score is very high, then it is highly malicious. If the score is very low, then it is very good. So what you do is you give a score to all these models and you aggregate the smallest n minus f of them, let's say, okay? The ones with the least score. But how do you determine the score of, how do you score these models? You score the models based on this metric. So for each model, what I will do is I will identify the n minus f minus 2 nearest neighbors. So what you could imagine is that, imagine this is a high dimensional space, okay? And your models are sitting here, right? So these are, what is this? This is, let's say, weight vector. Weight, biases, everything. You could imagine this to be one large vector. So if it's a ChatGPT, then it will be some billion parameters. So this will be billion dimensions, okay? That's how you need to imagine. So these are the different weights from the different clients. And you have some malicious clients, let's say, right? So the idea is that few of them are malicious, majority are fine. So for each client, what you do is you identify the nearest neighbors. You identify n minus f minus 2 nearest neighbors and you find the difference, right? Difference between the vectors. So this is what you do. You find this is the weight vector of ith client and this is the weight vector of the jth client. You find the differences and you sum the differences. So the idea is that the malicious clients will be reasonably far away from the normal clients. So the normal clients, they will probably be clustered close by. Ideally, may not always be true. So all these distances will be very small for all the non-malicious clients. But for the malicious clients, because we are also taking n minus f minus 2 nearest neighbors for the malicious clients, some of the nearest neighbors are bound to be nicer clients, right? Non-malicious. And they are bound to be reasonably farther away from the malicious clients. So the distance for the nearest neighbors for a malicious client ideally will be higher. Ideally, right? It's just a hypothesis, right? Ideally will be higher than the non-malicious clients. So in non-malicious clients, you would assume that you would find n minus f minus 2 clients which are clean. But for malicious clients, you cannot. You might have to go to the cleaner ones and not only the malicious ones. So the distance will tend to increase. So using that heuristic, it's just heuristic. They do have some proofs in the paper regarding its nicer properties, why it should work. But practically speaking, it only works in some cases. Right? So using the nearest neighbor distance, if the distance is small, then you're a clean, nicer client. If the distance is large, you tend to be malicious. So you sort them, take the least, the few of the 10%, smaller ones, or 30%, 40, whatever is your subset sampling, and then you aggregate them. And that will be your final aggregated model, right? So you could also use other approaches, this is just one. So for example, this is the performance that they have shown. So here, I forget which data. So I think this is SPAM-based dataset and this is MNIST dataset. So in SPAM-based dataset, if I don't have any clients which are malicious, which is the blue bar, right? The blue bar is 0 malicious clients and you're doing federated average. That is, you're averaging all the clients together. Then you that's the purple bar. Then you get a reasonably low error. Why low error? Because none of the clients are malicious and you're using everybody to aggregate. And CRUM, right, which is the robust aggregation, for the 0% BYZ is Byzantine clients or the malicious clients, it's the green bar. So the green bar is almost close to the purple bar, but still up, right? The error is slightly higher with CRUM because you're not aggregating all the clean clients. You're only aggregating some subset of it, assuming that you have some F% of malicious clients, right? So CRUM, when all clients are clean and you assume incorrectly that I have some amount of malicious clients, would underperform compared to the federated average. But on the other hand, if you have 45% of the clients which are malicious, then all of a sudden your error for federated average increases, right? So the malicious clients are causing increase in the error by almost 0.4, right? But on the other hand, if you use CRUM, right, you are still able to maintain the error, which is the yellow bar, right? You could see the similar sort of performance for MNIST as well, the handwritten digit dataset, right? So what this particular experiment shows is that when you have malicious clients, CRUM works at least on some datasets, right? The distance is for CRUM, no. CRUM, when you say CRUM, you would assume that this is what they do. Yeah. No, we assume F malicious clients, right? So I'll arrange S1, S2, S3, let's say in increasing order, and I'll take the N minus F clients and average them. I'll assume that these F are malicious. So F is the hyperparameter, you're correct. Like that will determine the distance threshold in some sense. No, that's just like the neurons in your neural network, some random. Because you won't know, right, how many clients are malicious. So if you overestimate, then your performance will drop. If you underestimate, then again your performance will drop. But assumption is F is, less than half. That's the only thing that we have. Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's correct. So this is with different batch. So when the batch size is reasonably small, the difference between the performance is not that high. But when the batch size is reasonably large, there is a higher difference. This is a heuristic that they... No, this is just experimental validation. They just show the effect in their data set. It's a reasonably, it's a very specific thing to their data set. So the idea is, if your batch size, I would assume that the local updates that you make are not very significant when your batch size is reasonably small. So no matter what you do, it doesn't matter a lot. That's. So if your batch size is small, right, which is why you are able to identify, let's say, the good set of clients, higher batch size. Yeah. Okay, so this is Scrum. There is something similar also you could do. In the interest of time, I'll probably sort of quickly go through this. This is trimmed mean. What it does is you have all these weight vectors, right? So let's say for client 1, you have weight vector. You have a 4-dimensional weight vector. And for client 2, you have 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, and so on. You have for client K, K1, K2, K4. So for each coordinate, you find the median, right? Or the mean in this. What you do is you arrange them in certain order. You reject the top few values and bottom few values and take the mean of the values in between, right? This is a largely heuristic. It just works and it's more popular, experimentally validated. So you reject these, you say, this is not what I'll use. I'll average out these values and I'll populate that as my average weight, right? And it is coordinate wise, right? So if the attacker is trying to only harm some weights, a different attacker is trying to harm some other weights, right? Then this sort of a defense would be more appropriate, right? As opposed to always assuming that I'll always skip this model, no matter what the weight is. What you're saying is that for each coordinate of the weight, I would make a decision which model to skip, okay? So, so this tends to work this is the, in general, key idea of this. So what you do is you take the n-2f, you reject f samples from top, f samples from bottom, and then you just take the middle n-2f and you take the average of those as your average weight for the final model. This is one other way of aggregating, tends to show some good performance in some data set. But the idea is that all this sort of attack is only, so this defense, the trimmed mean and crumb, this is only true if the attacker is trying to hurt accuracy, then you can defend against it. But there are so many other metrics and there are so many other things that you are interested in which potentially your attacker could be targeting. For instance, in our group, what we study is this notion of fairness. So let us see what this notion of fairness is. So this notion, the fairness in a classifier first came into forefront with this particular software, which is Compass, right? What is this software? It's a software which is deployed in US courts, right? And what does it do? It helps you predict how likely is criminal going to commit a crime again, based on his history, his other details, right? Demographic details and history of crimes, etc. Software will predict, oh, this person is likely, it'll give a score essentially. So for example, if you can see, the first person here has gotten a score of 3, which means low risk. The second person has gotten a score of 8, which means high risk, right? So this is the software which does that. So now this company with this NGO ProPublica, this ProPublica came and pointed out that this particular software has bias and is biased towards certain specific race of people. So what, if you can see this, I mean, you can't see this image, but what I can tell you from this particular article is that the first person is a murderer, right? Has committed a lot of grave crimes, but still the software only gave a score of 3. As opposed to that, the second person is a very young girl, just stole the bicycle because she was getting delayed for school or something. That too, once in her life did she do that, but she still got higher score compared to the person who is the first person. So one would imagine that you would give a higher score because of the data itself, right? Because the data shows that the first person has very grave and large number of crimes compared to person 2, but still person 2 is being given higher score because of her race, right? So that's the idea. So the idea is that, so out of, if you can see the statistics, among the white population, the model has made 47.7% false negative error. So the model has predicted them as low risk, but still they have committed crime. So it made almost 47.7% of error on that. But corresponding white, in the black population, you see, it is making the other kind of error more, right? The error where it is giving them high risk, but they did not actually commit any crime or commit a crime again, right? So this sort of errors, right? So your model is making errors, that's fine, but it is making only one kind of error, which is the false negative. It's sort of giving more advantage to a certain race and lesser advantage to the other race. So this is what is going to lead to this model getting sued, right? The company actually, the Compass is now, it's in a lot of legal, there's a big legal case, and there was a lot of back and forth between the company and ProPublica, which sort of arguing over these. So whenever you deploy a model, you need to ensure that such issues are not very prominent, right? Not only these, there are other Amazon hiring or Facebook advertisement, all of these have been shown to have certain biases, which we don't want. So you have certain input features to the model, and some features are sensitive. You don't want the model to base its prediction on the sensitive features which are not consequential for your output, right? So it could be race, gender, age, or your favorite sensitive attribute given your application. You could determine that. So now you want your model's predictions to be independent of the sensitive attributes. That's how you want to train your model. You want to train your model to be accurate. You also want to train your model's predictions to be independent of the sensitive attributes. That's the goal in some sense in the fairness literature. So, for example, if you have two different groups, right, there are two ways in which fairness is quantified. So, you have two different groups, group 1 and group 2. So, here, in group 1, 3 of them are actually, let's say, qualified, and 1 is not, 4 is not. In group 2, 2 of them are qualified, 7 and 8, and 2 are not. And your model sort of overestimates the qualification in group 1 and underestimates the qualification in group 2, right? So there are two ways in which you are unfair. One way is that you're offering unfair advantage to group 1 by giving more number of ones. You can just focus on the third column. So the number of ones in the third column is disbalanced. So that is one sort of balance that you might want to achieve. So that is the predictive outcomes are not balanced. You want to have equal number of ones, let's say. You want to offer equal number of opportunity to both the groups, even though the label is not equal. So the label itself is biased that way, but your government can mandate you to have equal number of people. So that's the 80% law in your US, right? Even though people may not be qualified in group 2 to actually get that job, your model must take at least 2 of them from group 2 also if it is taking 2 of them from group 1. That could be a mandate by your government irrespective of the label. So that is one sort of fairness that your government might want of you to sort of ensure in your model. The other kind of bias is in the fourth column. So you're making almost only one error in the first group, but you're making 2 errors in the first group. So the model may not be very good, but it should be equally bad for all the demographies. It should not be very bad for some and very good for some, right? You want to balance out your errors. And that is the other kind of fairness that you might want to achieve. So these lead to different kinds of metric. We will not get into the details of it. So demographic parity is the metric which is trying to achieve the first kind of balance, which is balance in the predictive outcome. And equalized odds is the second metric, which is trying to somewhat achieve the balance across errors, right? Across the fourth column. But slightly more than that, it is balancing not the overall error, but it is balancing the false negative rate and the false positive rate across the demography. So if let's say in the black population, I have a false negative rate of FNRB, and in the white population, I have a false negative rate of FNRW, then this difference should be 0. And in the black population, I have an FPR of this. This difference should be 0. If this is satisfied, then equalized odds is guaranteed. But of course, this is very tough. So what you do is you try to reduce, how do you get back? Okay, so you essentially try to approximate it. What you'd say is that I want FPR black minus FPR white to be within some epsilon. Not be exactly 0, but the difference should be very small. Okay, so that's the metrics that you have. So now there are ways in which you could. So first of all, there are many different approaches to ensure fairness, right, in your models. But today we'll be covering attacks on fairness. There could be people who are purposefully trying to sabotage the fairness that is anyway guaranteed in your model, right? So there are different approaches which do that. But what I wanted to point out majorly in these approaches which try to attack fairness is the following property. So this is one data set which is fairly common in fairness literature, which is known as the adult or income data set, which is the US data set. So I think very old, the one that we are using right now. I think the newer data set is available. So this is the old US Census data set. Here what you're trying to do is you're trying to predict income. Whether a particular individual with a lot of features like gender, age, occupation, etc. You're trying to predict whether the income of this candidate is more than $50,000 or less than $50,000, right? So it's a binary prediction. And if the income is more, then you would approve your loan, or you would use it in many downstream tasks. So you would want your predictions to be accurate, right? You don't want to unfairly reject people's loans, etc. So that's the idea. So the idea is that there is this paper which has proposed many different kinds of attacks. Let's not worry about what those attacks are. But what is interesting is whenever they are attacking, two things are increasing, right? When the number of poisonous samples increase, with the number of increase in poisonous samples, so this difference that I said we wanted to minimize is increasing. So it becomes more and more unfair. But at the same time, accuracy is also increasing. The error is also increasing. This is the BCE laws. So this particular paper, whenever is attacking both the fairness and the, let's say, the performance of the model. So what happens is such kind of attacks are actually flagged by crumb and trimmed mean very easily, right? Because the accuracy is also hurt to some extent. So now what in our work we try to propose an attack which attacks the fairness, by which I mean I want to increase the bias present in the data in terms of DP or EO. These are the two different metrics. So for now, what you could just remember is that higher the EO or higher the DP, the worse it is for us, the more unfair it is for us, right? So that's what. So we want to increase, the attacker wants to increase the DP and the EO irrespective of the aggregators we have. So even if there is a Fed average or there is crumb or there is trimmed mean, we want to be able to successfully attack the fairness of the model. So now, because we know that if we are attacking the accuracy of the model, if the accuracy of the model, of the local client model significantly differs from the accuracy of the rest of the models, then crumb or trimmed mean will be able to aggregate it out, will be able to weed it out. So now the goal is to attack fairness while maintaining the accuracy. That's what we need to do. So the first thing that could come into our mind is label flipping, right? By label flipping, what do I mean? So I take all the group 1 samples, right? And I have, let's say, x1, x2, x3, x4, and I give them all 1 as the label, even though that's not the case, right? As a local client who is malicious, and for group 2, I could give all the clients 0, right? Even though some of them, even though their true labels may not be this, I just purposefully do this so that the bias, if a model is trained on such a data, it will be definitely biased towards group 1 and against group 2, right? But if you do this, if your true labels are different, right, then this model's accuracy will also drop, right? So you don't want to do attacks like this because it will compromise both the accuracy and fairness. So the key is to maintain the accuracy. So how do we go about doing this? So this is a recent work which is accepted, the preliminary version is got accepted in one of the workshops at ICML. So the approach here is, the objective here is we want to solve this optimization. So what is this optimization? We want to maximize the bias, where I say LF, it's the loss corresponding to the fairness. There is some loss corresponding to fairness. And I want to maximize that loss. So I want the model to be more and more unfair. But my constraint is that the cross entropy loss, which is LCE, or the classification loss, right? This is the cross entropy or classification error, right? Should be within epsilon. I don't want it to be very high, right? So this is what I want to solve. So one naive way to solve constraint optimization is what? Let's forget about this. Is using Lagrangian, right? I have my objective, I introduce the Lagrangian constraint and I introduce the loss. I could take this as my single objective as a malicious client and try to optimize this, right? So this is what we began with in our paper as an experiment. We tried to train all the malicious clients with this objective. The objective is to have an appropriate lambda, which is a hyperparameter. You have to determine your lambda so that you get a reasonably bad fairness and good accuracy, right? But what we found out was that by directly doing this, the crumb and the trimmed mean were successfully able to flag these clients. The models trained using these objectives were reasonably different from the benign or the non-malicious clients, right? So these become reasonably different. So now the question is, how do you ensure that the weights are not very different? You want the weights to be in the same space so that they are not flagged by crumb and trimmed mean, right? That's the goal. So in order to do that, we have this concept of low rank adapters. So since a lot of you are aware of LLMs, how many of you have heard of this low rank adapters, Laura? Okay. So low rank adapters is when you are actually fine tuning your model, you don't want to train the entire model parameters. So what you introduce is low rank adapters, right? And you train those adapters instead of training the entire model space. So the number of parameters that now you need to train can be reduced, but the weight matrix will end up becoming a low rank weight matrix, right? So now our idea was that if we do not change the entire model, but we change only a low rank, we introduce a low rank adapter version of the model, so the model will not be significantly different from the benign or the non-malicious clients while still being able to cause the fairness or the bias to increase, right? So what is the idea is that every round the malicious client will have to send this particular update, which is delta theta. So theta t minus 1 is the model that the client is receiving from the server. And now the model, local client is training on the local data and getting this delta theta as the update, right? Now delta theta update is a very high rank update, right? It will be, let's say it's over, I don't know what's the dimension I've used. Yeah, so delta theta is a, let's say a D cross R, where D and R are very large, right? So this is a very high, very large model with many different parameters. So now the goal of the adversary is to ensure that this update is such that the bias is increased, but we want to yet stay close to the benign updates so that the crumb or trimmed mean does not detect us, right? So what we do is we replace delta theta with a low rank version, low rank adapter, which is AB transpose. So now I want to rewrite delta theta as AB transpose, where both A are low rank matrices, right? So it's D cross K and this is K cross R, where K is a very small value compared to D and R. This will ensure that AB transpose, now which we are using to represent delta theta, is low rank. The rank will be at most K. So just to give a estimate, the rank of the bigger matrix would be, so here I think it should be K. Oh, sorry. This is K here and this is R. The low rank that we are trying to get is R, right? So R will be less than D or K. Low parameter. So if I have, let's say, delta theta of D cross K of the order 10 to the 8, now the size of the delta theta would be 10 to the 8, which is a lot many parameters. But if I replace this with a low rank matrix with a rank of 10, right? When my R is 10, then the number of parameters that now I need is only 10 to the 6, right? It's orders of magnitude less than the previous. But of course, with our size of models, this will be even more significant. The gap would be even more significant. So this is the adapter that we sort of introduced, right? So let's just look at the methodology. What it does is you have this server which is sending theta t minus 1 to the malicious client, the red malicious client. First, the malicious client would do a normal training. It will try to, if I were not a malicious client, I would actually send theta hat back to the model, right? But now what I do is instead of sending theta hat, I inject noise in theta hat, right? To inject noise in theta hat, I do the following. In first phase, what I do is I try to learn A and B, which are my low rank parameters. Not sure if it is, right? In phase 1, so my variables are A and B, and my theta t minus 1 minus theta is the delta theta that I have. So my AB transpose has to be close to delta theta. Okay? So if by minimizing this loss, I'm ensuring that my accuracy is maintained, right? I'm closer to the model which is benign, right? This is the theta hat is the benign model. And if I'm closer to the benign model by introducing AB, so my phase 1 ensures that I'm closer to the benign model. And then I do phase 2, right? In phase 2, I try to optimize AB so that my bias is increased, right? So the fairness loss is maximized. Your fairness could be your favorite metric of fairness. So this phase-wise training is what we do. We do 2-step. So we keep repeating phase 1 and phase 2 till convergence, and then we send the final model, which is theta t minus 1 plus AB transpose, right? So this AB transpose is obtained after repetitions of phase 1 and phase 2. So in phase 1 ensures that accuracy is maintained, phase 2 ensures that bias is introduced, right? So the number of iterations you carry for each of the phases will then determine how powerful each of these phases are, right? Somewhat of a heuristical sort of experimental way of trying to get this done. So the advantage is, so it has some advantages that it does not need additional communication cost or newer aggregation protocols. It does not even need extra parameters, right? It works with the same parameters that you have. So this is the attack that we proposed. Just to look at the numbers. So if this is again adult data set, right? Here we are first of all doing federated average, which is when there are no clients, 0% clients are malicious, then you can guarantee yourself an accuracy of 85% and let's say delta EO of 0.118. But if you have 10% clients which are malicious, just a second. So if you have 10% clients which are malicious, then your accuracy drops to 84 and your EO is increased to 0.152. Similarly, if you increase the number of malicious clients to 40%, your accuracy only drops by some 2-3% and your EO increases by 0.374, right? So in federated average, anyway, you're able to guarantee a increase in bias by 0.374. Of course, your accuracy till 20% remains almost same, but beyond 20%, when there are more malicious clients, accuracy tends to drop. Similarly, had you had Crumb as your aggregator, your accuracy again from 85% is again dropping to only by 2-3%, and you're still somehow managing to increase the bias in the model. So from 0.118 to you're able to increase it to 0.318, which is a significant bias that you're introducing in the model. So the idea, so similarly for the trimmed mean aggregator as well. So what we are essentially showing is that with minimum drop in accuracy, you're able to increase the bias. So just to keep it in perspective, there is a previous approach which also proposes attack, right? It proposes a different attack, but for their approach, what they are able to show is that with 20% malicious clients, their accuracy reduces by 3%, and the increase in EO is from 0.25 to 0.41. On the other hand, for us, the accuracy drops by less than 1% when there are 20% malicious clients, and your EO significantly drops, right? Significantly increases, from 0.09 to 0.16. So this is the existing approach which also proposes attack on fairness. So and what we believe works for us is the fact that we are introducing the low rank adapters. So we really want to try to understand how these adapters are beneficial for us, right? So we ask we do some interpretability analysis of our approach. We ask 3 different questions. So does the adapter really help evade Crumb? Right? That's the first question. The second question is, do the adapters really amplify the bias that is present in that the malicious client is trying to increase? And then how do you really determine the rank of A and B, right? That's also a hyperparameter that you need to understand. How low of a rank is good enough for you to be able to attack the global model. So for the question 1, what we are able to show that with varying rank, right? If I take the rank to be 32, so when I say 32, the rank is the R value. A is now a D cross 32, and your B is also some K cross 32 matrix, right? So when your rank is reasonably high, right? So the malicious, so what I am reporting here is the frequency with which, or the fraction of times malicious clients are being selected in round. So in 50 communication rounds, in how many rounds malicious clients are actually to make through the aggregation. So if the rank is very high, then the malicious clients are not able to make through to the aggregation. So Crumb is able to weed the malicious clients out. But if the rank is low, Crumb is not able to weed the malicious clients out, because 94% of the times the malicious clients are making into the aggregation. Why? Because when the rank is low, then the change in the model parameters that you can make is very less. It's not detectable by Crumb. But when the rank is high, then you're reasonably changing the model parameters so much that the Crumb is able to detect. So with rank, you're able to, so that is also visible here. So higher the rank, the farther is the gap from the global model. So theta t minus theta it is the distance between the global model and your malicious model. So for a higher rank, which is the pink one, rank 32, the distance is very high, but for rank 2, the distance is very low. Okay. So higher the distance, it's easier for Crumb. Okay, so similarly, we make some other we can just skip this in the interest of time. Let's directly move to questions if you guys have any. So this is to conclude, what we tried to propose was we tried to propose an adversarial attack on the fairness of the model, which evades the existing robust aggregators. The robust aggregators are only designed to be robust towards accuracy and not towards fairness. So we are able to successfully attack the clients by ensuring that the accuracy is not compromised while you're attacking, right? But now the question, there's a lot of scope in this work. First thing is you could try to design aggregators which are good for fairness as well. And also, of course, you could improve upon the attacks that you have currently proposed, right? So this is, in conclusion, what I've been presenting. So any questions, any comments are welcome. So if any of you are interested in such kind of work, please do drop by my office, or could also email me. We could discuss in terms of the different projects that right now are being conducted in our lab around federated learning. In our lab, we are also interested in incentives in combining game theory and federated learning, where you are trying to incentivize different clients to really share the true data and true values. Like, clients could lie about their values, the number of data sets they have, the kind of data that they have. They could also give you garbage data. So how do you really incentivize them by monetary compensation? How do you really determine the monetary compensation? All of that is also of interest to our lab, right? Okay, thank you.